Okay, sorry for the late notice, and we're going to try to have a lot of catch-up to do as I just got back from Eretz Yisrael, so we're a little bit behind in the Shirim. We're going to try to go through together the Shulchan Aruch. So I guess we'll see this in recording. Please have your Shulchan Aruch with you to follow along the Mar Makomos that we're going to go through inside as we go through the first 4 sifim of the Shulchan Aruch in Eretz Hashem this year. So starting with the beginning of Kuf Chaf Aleph, says the Shulchan Aruch, "Halokeach kelim yeshanim mina b'kachavim." You take old or used kelim from a goy. So the poskim speak about kelim yeshanim. Like today, what we buy in a store is obviously not kelim yeshanim. We're talking about a time where either you bought actual used kelim, or you're not sure. And we'll speak about what happens if you're not sure how they were used. Kelim, you're not sure if they were used or not because they're old and there's a possibility that they were used. So such kelim kaderach shenishtamish behem ovikachavim kachu echsheren. However the goy used them, that's how we're makshir them. Like we say, the Gemara says kabolo kachpoto, the way that they absorbed, that's the way that we expunge the isser out of the kli. Expel the isser to come out of the kli. The way it was used, that's how we expel it. So Tikach halokeach kli tashmish yishanim shenishtamish behem b'tzoinen gon kosos b'tzluchios ukiyotza behem ma'dichan. If we buy kelim which are only used b'tzoinen with cold, like cups and other types of saucers and things that are only used when they're cold, so all you do is medichan. All you have to do is wash them well. B'sarach l'shafshef and heitev b'mayim b'shas adacha. You have to rub them well with water at the time that you wash them, in order to get off, completely cleanse away the isser that's on top of them, but it's only on the surface, it's nothing going inside because it was all used with cold. After you do shtifa b'mayim, and after first the initial scraping and rubbing, then you do a shtifa, you do a rinsing, and then you do your tovel b'mikvah, because we need that's a mitzvah deraisa to be tovel the kelim coming from a goy, which we'll speak a little bit more about that. And then they become mutar to use after that. So now this halacha over here that it mentions to do shtifa, to rinse it off afterwards. So we discussed this point in the Shuir right before Pesach, that Rabbi Soloveitchik was medayik for the Rambam, that the Rambam does not mention this halacha of shtifa with regards to regular Yisurim. He only mentions it with regards to Pesach, Klei Pesach. When you do Hagala for Kelim for Pesach, that it says that you should do Hagala and afterwards do shtifa, which is a rinse. And so he mentions that by Pesach, but not by Shar Yisurim. The Shulchan Aruch here does mention it. The Rambam did not mention it. So the makor of the din shtifa comes from kachim, that we have a halacha of marika v'shtifa, that if you want to use, let's say, a metal kli that was used for one korban, in order that it shouldn't become nosar, or if it became nosar, you have to first do hagala on that kli, and then shtifa, marika v'shtifa. We have yalfusas, we have limudim, you have to do both over there. So it's a din in kachim that you need after the hagala, which is called the marika, they have to do shtifa. And the Rambam that mentions that by Klei Pesach, so just in a nutshell, we discussed this in length before Pesach, that Rabbi Soloveitchik wanted to say Yisod in the Rambam, that the Rambam mentions it by Klei Pesach and not by Shar Kelim, because just like by Kachim, there's a certain din Kedusha, you have to take off the shtamshtus of the previous korban, that it should be miyuchad for the new upcoming korban, and the shtifa is what brings it into that new level. Hu din Klei Pesach, that if you have to change something from a shame klei chametz to have a new shame of klei pesach, and therefore it's similar to kachim in that way that there's din shtifa by klei pesach. Masha inken by shari surim, the whole reason you do, the only reason you have to perform hagala is just to get the isser out. There's no elevation that you have to do to put a new shame on that kli. Although one could say that, could be cholik and say that no, that there is a din to be meichel l'shem Klei Yisrael. There's a level of kedusha on a Shulchan Yisrael to have a Klei Yisrael, but Rav doesn't want to say that. He says that by Shari Mos Hashem, the Rambam doesn't say there's a din of shtifa, because all you're coming to do is to take away the Isser by Shar Isurim, but Mashen came by Chametz. You're trying to create a new level of a Kli. It's Roy the Pesach. That's his Chiddush. Without going into that again, just want to say that over here you see that the Shulchan Aruch holds Pascha is not like the Rambam. The Shulchan Aruch says there's a din shtifa also by Shar Isurim. So even by kalim that are used for tzonin, there's a din to be mishafsheth them and to clean them very well, to get off the Isser, and then to do a shtifa. And certainly by Hagala it's so. And the reason of the din shtifa would be, the post going to say, by Shar Yisurim is just to make sure that the Isser is completely off. Like for example, if you do Hagala, we're going to have one halacha going all the way across the board. So if one does Hagala, so you have expunged the Isser out of it, and it's gone out from inside the Kli onto the surface of the Kli, and a lot of it into the water that the Kli is in, obviously, as well as, when you take that out of that hot water that you put it in, so some of that Isser can be stuck back on the walls of the Kli. So Mela, just a practical thing that we have to do shtifa in order to wash it off of the Kli. So the way we're paskening, it's possible that the poskim that we're going with, and the Shulchan Aruch is paskening that we do shtifa by Shar Yisurim. So either they hold by kachim, it's also a din like Shar Yisurim. The kachim, there's no special din. You have to get raised to a higher level of a kli because we don't have that over here. So, or they might be holding that it maybe in fact there is a din to be mala the kli, just like there's a din to be mala the kli of kachim to make it roy for the next kachim, for the next karbanas. So also there might be a din to be ma'ala kli, just besides getting the Isser out, but to take it to the next level of shtifa to make it roy to be kli Yisrael. So there's no really definitive way to explain this, but those are the two possibilities. That's what we see from the Shulchan Aruch. Wakapanim, that's an important halacha that when you do Hagala, you immediately rinse it off with cold water. That's the Maisa. Now, and then it says afterwards, you're matbil the Kli, and the Shach points out, he says that's halacha by clay matchos, but the Shach doesn't mean to the exclusion of glass, because in the Shulchan Aruch, in the beginning of Siman Kuchaf, the previous Siman, which is the Siman which deals with Tevilas Kalim, so there the Shulchan Aruch says that clay schuchis also have a chiyuv Tevilas. So whether it's metal or glass, then you have to be tovel it afterwards in a mikveh. Just a basic nafkamina, glass and any other type of surface that we are matbil is only midrabanan, only matchos or deraisa. So perhaps the Shach was just mentioning those kalim which would be a chiyuv deraisa. But halacha, glass and other such kalim do need tefillah. We're not going to go into this at length now because we're not going into tefillah's kalim, but just agavorche, expensive china, like the top level china, what we call real china. So that's a machlokes poskim because the base of the china is a dama. It's evan or a dama. It's just there's a layer of glass around it, and that chiyuv to do tovel glass, which is a chiyuv darbanan. So that's a machlokes poskim of Shlomo Zalman or Moshe and other poskim. There's a machlokes whether or not they have a chiyuv tefillah. So the mice of the minig is to be tovel those things, those type of kelim without a bracha, unless it's a shastchak or a very difficult situation. Then there's who to rely on not to have to be tovel china. Certainly, that's only a question by china. By stoneware, which is much more simple, stoneware lakuli alma does not need tefillah. And one way to tell whether it's stoneware or it's real china, or even china within China itself, whether it's real china or not, because only if it's the higher level china that's completely surrounded by glass would there be a chiyuv tefillah. If it's not completely surrounded, if there are any areas of the china that's not surrounded by glass, the kuli alma, you do not need tefillah. So the way to check that always is just to turn it over, and the rim is on the bottom of the plate. You can see if there's a glass on the very bottom of that rim under the plate. If it's coated by glass down there, then it's real china. By regular, more simple china or by stoneware, you'll see that rim at the bottom is exposed stoneware or exposed cheres, but you're not going to have actually glass on the bottom there, and that's one way to tell that the kuli alma does not need tefillah. Plastic, all types of plastic. So Diane Weiss, Shut Minchas Yitzchak has a suffix about that. He's machmir to be tova plastic, but the minig olam is not to be, which is the shita, the psak of Rav Moshe, it's the psak of the Chazanish, and it's the psak of Rav Henkin, Zochanim al Lavracha, that they all pass on the plastic does not need, and that's the prevalent minig, is not to be tova plastic. However, I generally pass on like Rav Shmuel first, who I believe he got it from Moshe, that we can kosher plastic. However, we can do, if plastic became trace or something, you're able to during the year to kosher plastic. We don't have to be tovel, but you can kosher it. Just for Pesach, or machmer not to be tovel, and not to be to be magil plastic, any kind of plasticware. But for the rest of the year, we are knowing to kosher plastic. Okay. Now the Shulchan Aruch says that kederach, like we mentioned, kederach shenishtamesh behem, the way that the goy used it, that's the way we kosher it. And what if you don't know? What if you buy a kli, or you get a kli from a goy? You're not sure if he used it through libun, whether he had it. Or open fire, which would require libun, or if he just cooked with it with water in a way which would only require hagala. So if you're not sure, so the post can say that we go after the way that the kli is usually that kind of kli most people use it for, then you can assume that's the way it was used, and that's the only type of kashrus you need to do for it. Kashrus the way it's normally done. Because anyway, in any case, we can assume that the robe of the tashmish was the way that's normally done, even though he might have used it here and there for an extraneous situation. He might have used it for a higher level of use. And we already discussed a couple of times the machlokas, the mechaber, and the Ramah. If we go after rov tashmisho, and the Ramah Mikra din holds like the mechaber that you could just use machmad chatchila, but b'diavad he's mikol. So, and we said that to go after rov tashmisho is because now that we're kashing it when it's Einu ben Yomo, it's after 24 hours, it's only Chiyav Drabanan, and there's no Isser left in the Kli Be'etzim, it's just a din on the Gavra to kasher it, to use it in order because you might come to use a Kli that's a ben Yomo if we allow him to use Einu ben Yomo. So that since the Ikra din doesn't really need kashering, it's just more of a Gzera Atu ben Yomo, so it makes sense we can go after Rov Tashmisho. So certainly if you buy a Kli from a Goy that you're not sure how you used it, we will go after the Rov of the way this Kli is generally used. That's the way you would kasher it. That's what the poskim say, the Achronim say. So that's a few ha'aros on Sif Aleph. Going to Sif Beis, it says, Lokach mehem kelim shenishtamish behem b'chamin. He bought from a goy kelim that are used with hot water. Bein shem shel matchas or shel eitz or even magilan v'charkach med bilan. So you do the hagala, and afterwards the tefillah. Shulchan Aruch specifies the order of the hagala, and then afterwards tefillah. Yehim shel mateches. If they're metal, meaning if there's a type of a kli that has a chi of tefillah at all. If it would be shel eitz or Evan, there's no chi of tefillah on it, so then there's no question of an order, there's no tefillah. Hey mutarin. Bimid bilan v'hargach higilan mutarin. So the Shulchan Aruch says that the Maisa, if you would switch the order, then it's still mutar. V'yashomrim shetzarach lachzor ulat bilan. And the second shita holds that if you switch the order is ma'akev. You have to go and after the Hagala, re-tovel the Kli again. So the Maisa, we'll speak about this a little bit, this machlokas, if the order is ma'akev or not. And the Maisa, this is based on the Lashon of the Brisa that says that magilan umat bilan. So the order of the Brisa is to Hagala, and then afterwards tefillah, which is really like the post can point out, that's the mashmos of the Seder Pasuk in B'midbar Lamed Aleph Chav Gimel by Klei Midyan, which is the source of all these halachas when the Mechemes Midyan, when Klai Yisrael took the Kelim from the Midyarim, and it says over there that Taviru Be'esh V'Taher. So Taviru Be'esh is Libun. those kelim that need libun. But taher is referring to the tara that you get through the mikveh. So that from the lashon of pasuk, so the Gra points out that you see that it's mefurish b'Torah that there is this order. The order we're talking about from the Brisa really is mefurish b'Kra. But nevertheless, the Rashba in Torah Sabais says that even though it's taka mefurish b'Kra, but all we see from the pasuk, all we have a raya to from the pasuk is that that's the seder l'chatchila. We don't have a raya from that the seder is ma'akev. And that's really the machlokas over here in the 2 days in Shulchan Aruch, whether the seder is ma'akev or not. So according to the first day of the Mechaber, that it's not ma'akev, it's simply a seder l'chatchila. Like we have many other things that are seder l'chatchila that are not likuba. Very, very often we find these things in halacha by korbanos and by certain times by certain areas of halacha that we have a certain seder. It's not ma'akev. But the second shita holds that it's a din, like the poskim point out, like the Rashba says, that it's midin tovel b'sheretz biyado. That's the classic case of a person is tamei tumas sheretz, and he goes and he jumps in the mikveh while he's holding the sheretz. So obviously the mikveh is not going to be matire him from the tumas sheretz. So that's sort of kind of like the sine qua non of a tefillah that doesn't work. We call it tovel b'sheretz biyado. And in this case over here, these are shonim that are saying this ma'akev are saying that the whole tachlis of the tefillah is to bring it up to the level of being royally shtamshus of a yid. And so kol zman it's treif, then there's no way you can bring it be ma'ala to the kedusha to take away the tuma and make it royally shtamshus. So it's called tovel b'sheretz b'yado. So now la halacha the shach in Sifkat and Hay paskins that if you're mahapet seder, you should be choser and be tovel again below bracha, because we're certainly choshesh for the first shita that you are yotzei, but we're choshesh for the second shita that you're not, so we're tovel below bracha. There's an interesting question, the Chalkas ben Yamin, which by the way, the Chalkas ben Yamin, that's Binyamin Cohen, the son of the body of Shulchan, wrote a number of very beautiful sforim in the very same style as the body of Shulchan, as his father. And among them are all these halachas of Hagalas Kelim and Tfilas Kelim and Pas Akum and all these simonim over here in Shulchan Aruch, which are hopefully we'll do some over the years in this program. He's really wrote a very, very beautiful foundational sefer on this area. So we're probably quoting a lot the Chalkas ben Yamin. So he, in his tziyunim in Os Chavtes, he raises a question that according to the shitas of Machmirim that holds that the seder is ma'akev, is it ma'akev midaraisa or midrabanan? It's not really clear. It's not mavur on the poskim whether it's deraisa or derabanan. I would have thought from the stimus of poskim from the Gra that they're saying that it's mufurish b'kra, there's a seder. So then the question is that seder ma'akev or not? Then it is. That becomes a din deraisa because it's just showing that seder that the pasuk says we're holding the seder is ma'akev. So it's more indicative that it's ikub midaraisa. He nevertheless remains in a doubt with this because it's dubious from as far as the sources go, the Makoros, whether it's a derabanan or a deraisa according to the Machmirim. Now, it's very possible that this gufa is the machlukas, the poskim, that the Shach and Sifkat and Daled, where he mentions this halacha of Tova v'sheretz b'yado, he quotes a very interesting levush, where it says Ayin Tes Zayin, that stands for Atera Zav, which is the precise name really of the levush Malchus. So the levush says a chiddush that, and the Shach and Sifkat and Daled quotes it. He says, "Im lo yirtze lishtamish bo el etzonen yochal ad bilo lishtamish bo tzonen." Says that even if a kli was used with chamin and it needs betzim hagala b'chamin, if you decide you don't want to use it for chamin, you just want to use it for tzonen. So it's no longer necessary really make her a din to be to kasher it from chamin if you want to use it but tzonen, and therefore the tefillah would be really for tzonen, not for chamin. So in this case, you could do tefillah even before you do hagala, even if you didn't do hagala at all, and it would work. And later on, he says, "K'sheyirtza acharka l'shtamish b'ochamin yagilenu v'yaspik lo tefila shitbilu kfar afilu man dematzach tefila shenis shani hacha shvetchila lo hayadaita l'shtamish b'elatzonin elatzonin sagile b'tefila." So he says a tremendous chiddush that since your kavanah was to use it only for tzonin, and you already were tovel it, which you didn't need Hagala for the tzonin, you were tovel it for the tzonin. Then you changed your mind later, decided you want to use chamin, so now you need to kasher it for chamin. You need to do Hagala, so that Hagala that you do does not necessitate a new tefillah, because the tefillah you already took it out of its tumas akum when you used it for tzonin. And so now at this point, all you need to do is to do Hagala, and that's fine, because since you were tovel up a heter, then the tefillah works. You don't need a tefillah shenis. That's the shita of the levush. However, the Piskei Tshuva in Os Daled, he says, he quotes the Shach b'shem levush, and he says, "V'ayin tiferes l'Moshe shacholek al zeh." The Tiferes Moshe is cholek, and he holds the das yesh omrim elu. According to the yesh omrim, that holds that the seder is ma'akev. Afim rotz l'shtamis tzonin lamahani tefila kishav v'kachavim yishtamis b'chamin even though he gilo tefila ayin sham. So he holds that it's not true. That since the goy used it for chamin, and to use it for chamin you need hagala b'chamin. So according to the Matan Omer, that the order is ma'akev, then without doing hagala, then you can't do tefila, and it is ma'akev. It's cholakan on levush. So I was thinking that possibly the Nekudas Machlokas is this din of tovel v'sheretz biyado. We can clear hakira. We have to really focus on this point of what is really. Is it really mean it's really a sheretz biyado? That there's something about having the blia and the kli that makes it like a sheretz for the tefillah, even though it's two separate halachas. One is for eating and one is for taking out tuma. Nevertheless, it's considered like a sheretz biyado, and it's really mamish a sheretz. It's really ma'akev, or is it just michzei? We find a lashon if some of the posts can say michzei ketova v'sheretz biyado. It looks like you're being tovel with a sheretz biyado. So it's not really maker a din that way, but it just looks that way. So if it's according to the levush, it seems that it's just a din michzei. It seems to be a sheretz biyado. And within michzei, when is it michzei sheretz biyado? That's only if you need the hagala to use it the way you plan to use it. So then so it's not kosher. It's not usable yet. You didn't bring it to a state that is even edible. It's even kosher yet. It's kosher to use, and you're going to be tovel it now. That's michzei sheretz biyado. Masha'enken, if you only plan to use it for tzonin, so it's perfectly ready to be used. So now to use it without tefillah, or then to be tovel it now, it's no problem. Why should it look like sheretz biyado? For the use that you plan to use it, it's perfectly fine right now. So it doesn't look like sheretz biyado. That could be the explanation of the levush, because it's all about. It's not really etzem the chatzitza like a tefillah, like a let's say dirt on a woman that's being tovel. It's a real chatzitza. It's like a sheretz biyado. It's just michzei. It looks like it. But when does it look like it? That's only when the use that you need it for the hagala hasn't been done yet. But if for the use that you need it for, you don't need hagala, so then the hagala that you're not doing should not be getting in the way of your being tovel, because it's not michzei tovel sheretz biyado. But according to Tiferes Moshe, it's not michzei. It's a real tovel sheretz biyado. For some reason, it's the what's in the kli is truly considered like a chatzitza for the tefillah. Therefore, it doesn't matter what your shtamshus is. What you plan to use it for becomes irrelevant, because sof kol sof, it's balua with treif, and now you can't be tovel it without that first purging out the treif that's in it. That's possibly the nekudas machlokas. Now, there's a chiddush over here, the Dogam Ravava, which almost turns all this into becoming the whole discussion, almost makes the whole thing irrelevant. This whole discussion irrelevant because the Dogam Ravava, just for historical sake, just to know the Dogam Ravava is the same author as the Noda B'Yehuda. So Dogam Ravava writes, if you look in Shulchan Aruch there, on the side, the little letters, it says, "Lanius daiti dim enam b'nei yoiman l'kuli alma shari lat bilo tchila shari ein kan tovo sheretz biyado shekemin she'enu ben yomo ein kan shum sheretz midiraisa heter gamerhu ofila midirabanan ein kan sheretz also l'shtamish bo gzera shema yishtamish b'odo ben yomo kenni lanius daiti borer." He's paskins. It's very clear to him that when is there a din tol sheretz biyado? That's only if it's a ben yomo. That what's balua and the kli still has a shem iser, and the reason you can't use a kli is because you have a real chefstishal iser in the walls of the kli. It's really treif. So then it's tova b'sheretz biyado. You have a real sheretz there. But after it's an ein ben yomo, it's no longer any treif there whatsoever. It's tam gam, and it doesn't answer anything. So there is no iser there. In Midaraisa, it's totally mutter. So not only is no iser that there's no iser at all mitzad the cheftza of the kli or mitzad the cheftza of the iser. It's only a din on the gavra, like we said before, like Ramosha explained in the din of Rov Tashmisho. It's only a din on the gavra not to use it, so you shouldn't come to use a ben yomo. So there's nothing there to be a chatzitza. That's what the Dogma paskins. So now, according to that, this whole diyun becomes totally irrelevant of what the order is, because since the Ramah says later on that the minig is not to be tova, not to do hagala on any kli at all, that's a ben yomo. Where is it? Yeah, the next line of the Ramah, since the page says that the beginning of the Ramah, ein lahagil shum kli kol zman shu ben yomo. So you can't do hagala on any kli that's a ben yomo. That's the minig, which we'll speak about that more shortly. But according to this, since we're not told anything that's a ben yomo, and Dogam Ravava says that the whole question of the order of tova v'sheretz biyado is only when it's a ben yomo, so then the whole question of order becomes irrelevant. Which Lamaisa, the Chalkas B'Yamin, we're going to see. Well, we'll take a step back. This din of the Noda B'Yehuda, which is also a psak of the Aruch HaShulchan, and it's clearly also the psak of the Piskei Tshuva. The Piskei Tshuva in Oz Gimel just quotes Dogam Ravava and doesn't quote any that is cholik on it. So you see that the Piskei Tshuva, Aruch HaShulchan, they're all paskin like this Dogam Ravava. However, the Makor Mayim Chaim, the Makor Chaim and other Achronim are cholik on this Dogam Ravava. The Makor Chaim is like one of the principal Achronim on Hilchos Pesach. So it's like when you look at Hilchos Pesach, you don't budge from the Makor Chaim. And it's written by the same author as the Chavas Das and the Nesivos. It's one of the most basic poskim on Hilchos Pesach. He's cholik on this halacha. And the Maisa is he paskins the Maisa to be machmir, at least atchila, to be machmir, that we need to have the proper seder of hagala and afterwards tefillah, at least atchila, we have to be machmir for that seder. So now I think since there's a lot of yisodos that sort of are misaviv this Dogam Ravava, we're going to spend a few minutes discussing a few of the points that come out, whether we paskin like him or not, and some of the yisodos around it. So first of all, how do we understand this machlokas, the Dogam Ravava and the Makor Chaim and other achronim that are cholik on him? So it's possible to say that the machlokas is, like we mentioned before, whether or not the din it's really a din chatzitza, or it just michse ke tova v'sheretz b'yado. Is it really tova v'sheretz b'yado, or just does it look that way? So if it's really a din, it's also because it's really considered a real chatzitza. It's really considered like your tova v'sheretz b'yado. That will only be applicable when there really is a sheretz there, and we understand the yisod of the Dogam Ravava. There's no sheretz. There's no reason to do it. But if it's a michse, it's not a real din, it's a michse. In this case, the michse will be a chumrah, I think. So it will be more machmer because of the michse. It's a reason to be more machmer because even though it no longer be any real issue there, but in the eyes of people, it still might look like it's or feel like you're since the halacha is to do hagala on it, so it feels like a tov of sheretz b'yado. So that might be the reason that this did Rabbanu would still apply even after it's an Eina ben Yomo. That's one possible svara. Another possible explanation will be that could be telling another point over here. There's a machlokes Rishonim, and it's in Kuf Gimel in Yordea and other places that what is pshat in Eina ben Yomo? What is pshat in Nosen Tam of Gam, the walls of a kli? So one way to understand it is that, in which road poskim seem to understand, is that Eina ben Yomo turns whatever was on the walls of the kli, which was only tam. There's a chiddush of tam, which we say that tam ki'ikr, and there's a chiddush that the tam also is like the thing itself. That's only when it's tam toiv, when it's a good tam. But when the tam becomes tam lefgam, so then it's no longer the tam that the Torah is mechadish. It's no longer within the chiddush of tam ki'ikr. And so it's not, there's no cheftz of Isser left there whatsoever in the walls of the Kli. Other Rishonim say no, that in the walls of the Kli, it still is good tam. It's just that it comes out, when it comes out of the walls into another Michael, once it was sat in the walls 24 hours, it doesn't have a koach to come out and also the other Michael. It goes into the Michael as a tam lifgam, like a gone bad taste, and therefore it doesn't have a koach to aser the food that's in the pot. So it's possible that this machlokas, the Dagam Ravava and the Mokar Chaim and others, will be based on that machlokas. If you hold that there's nothing left on the walls at all, there's no chefza on the walls once it's lifgam, then that's hezbollah the Dagam Ravava. There's no chatzitza, there's no sheretz v'yedo anymore. But if you learn like the other Rishonim that what's in the walls of the Kli is still taka aser, it's still, there's Isser there, just doesn't have a power to aser other things. So there's no nafkamina l'gabe cooking things, but there is a nafkamina l'gabe this halacha. It's a tremendous new nafkamina in that machlokas over here that maybe it's still considered that there's a sheretz in the walls. And therefore it's tov of a sheretz b'yado that it's ma'akev the tefillah according to the Yesh Omrim that the Seder is ma'akev. So that would be a reason why to be machmer even after 24 hours, according to the Mokar Chaim and others. And the last possibility would be, which really ties back to what we said before, that the svor of Igros Moshe, which the Dagam Ravava seems to be hinting to, that Igros Moshe, the way he explained why we go after Rov Tashmisho, even though there might have been a minimal Tashmisho on a higher level, because it's after 24 hours, and really there's no chiyuv and ikr din to be tovel at all, just it's exeris chamim, you might use a ben yomo. But really it's a din in the gavra, there's no isra in the hefza at all of the kli. And that's where Moshe explains. But the other poskim that say you don't go after Rov Tashmisho, you do have to worry about the one tashmish. Their pashtas hold that that the din that Chazal gave to do hagala on a kli that's Eina ben Yomo, they gave it the tokef like there's still an isser on the walls of the kli. So that question whether it's considered like an isser on the walls of the kli or just a din in the gavra, so that could be the kudas machlokas Dagam Ravava holds is din in the gavra. And therefore there's no tov of sheretz b'yedo. There's no sheretz there. Just as din on me, that doesn't make a sheretz in the kli. Therefore the seder's not makev anymore once it's past 24 hours. But the other poskim hold that Chazal, when they were machmir to do agala on a kli even after 24 hours, ata ben yomo, they didn't just make a din in the gavra. Once they asered it, they asered it in the kli. So therefore you still have a sheretz in the kli even after 24 hours, which could be the explanation of those that are machmir, not like the Dagam Ravava. So those are three possible explanations of the machlokas, the Dagam Ravava, and the other poskim, whether the seder is ma'akev after it's Eina ben Yomo. And then I saw afterwards in the Chokos ben Yamin, he says similar to our pshat, but with a different machlokas, that there's 2 days in the Rashba in the Torah Sabais, why after 24 hours it's okay, nothing becomes usher in the kli that you cook after 24 hours once it was lifgan, either because there's no isser left anymore. Once it's pogum, it's not isser at all, or it's just niklash. The pugum doesn't mean that it becomes mamish a bad taste. It just becomes weak. And since it's so weak, the weaker taste goes into the food and it becomes bottle in the food. It's bottle there. So if it's only a question of becoming bottle in the food, that means that the tam is still good on the walls of the kli. And that would be a reason why it's still considered sheretz biyado. But if that's the case, then why would the dogma of be so makel? Since there is a shita like that in the Rashba, then sof kol sof, why would the dogma be makel? And another kasha is that there's a halacha of a davar harif. In your day, we have a halacha that if you, even a klis enev in yomo, this tam of gam, if let's say if you have a tam of gam and a knife, and a sharp knife, and then you cut a sharp radish with it, the davar harif, then it says miyachal shvach. Then it turns the gam back into the shvach. So we see if that's the case, then it becomes usher, and most poskim hold that that's a din deraisa. It becomes usher deraisa even after 24 hours if you use the davar harif on that kli, which would seem to indicate that there still is the kuliyam, is something left in the walls of the kli that could be usher even deraisa. So that kasha you could answer like there's a Chasam Sofer which says that even though you could turn it back into Isser, but Kol Zman, you didn't do that yet, it's not considered Isser at all. It's like you're creating a new Isser out of the Davar Harif. It's a little bit difficult, but there's Chasam Sofer like that right now it's not an Isser, it only becomes an Isser later on. So therefore right now you don't have a Chefsed Isser. Right now you do not have a Sheretz Biyado. So that we can get away with that, but Lamaisa, according to the Rashba, that you have a tzad to say that the reason that Talmud of Gam works is that it's not really pugam mamish, it's just that it becomes weaker, so it's bottle in the food, but sof kol sof you have a sheretz, so how could the dagam of be makel? So the Chagos Minyamin wants to say a nice chiddush, which Lamaisa is also it's found in the Chuvas Beis Shlomo, he brings down. He wants to say the following: a very important yesod when it comes to tefillas kalim. The shot in tefillas kalim, the tefillah that we're doing, is in order to be matir the hishtamshus of the kli. Holds man that it has tumas akum on it, then you can't be mishtamish in that kli as a kli ochel. So the soda of the tefillah, it's not just a dry din to do a tefillah, a dry xeris kasav, but it's a tefillah that we're going to come to be able to mishtamish, to be able to use this kli. And therefore the yesod of the tov of a sheretz biyado, the getter of the sheretz, the mahus, the essence of the sheretz biyado that would be ma'ak of the tefillah would be if you have a type of a sheretz, or in other words, a isser there that we'll call a sheretz, which is monea, which prevents the ishtamshus of the kli, of us using that kli at all. So if you can't use it mitzad the kli itself, then certainly it's not in a position that you should be able to be tovel it, to be matter the ishtamshus, to take off the tumas ishtamshus, to be matter the ishtamshus of the kli through the tefillah. So, and meaning to say that only a isser that's in the kli that will prevent you from using that kli, b'chalal, that will be considered a sheretz concerning the tefillah, because the tefillah is coming in order to be matzah the ishtamshus. But if you'll have some kind of a sheretz in the kli that doesn't hinder your ishtamshus of the kli, it doesn't withhold your ability to have kashrus with that kli, even though it might be in the walls of the kli, it's not considered a sheretz klape the tefillah. So therefore, even though there might be some blua of Isser still left in the walls of the Kli, it might taka be a shame Isser in the walls of the Kli, and all it does is weaken it. It becomes bottle in the food. Since sof kol sof, it will become bottle in the food, and therefore there's no reason not to use it midiraisa to eat the food, to cook anything in it. So there's nothing that's absorbed in the walls that prevents us from using that Kli. So there's no prevention, there's no withholding from the shtamshus. It's also not considered a sheretz for the tefillah of the kli, for the tefillah's kli. So that would be the svara of the Dogam Revava, that it'll work even according to the Rashba, even according to those shitas, the whole thing is still something left on the walls of the Kli. That will not be a reason to still the Dagam Vava can say even according to them you'll be allowed to be your Chatchila to be tova the Kli first before the Hagala, because there's nothing. The Hagala is not really being matir the etzem ishtamshus mikra din midaraisa, so it doesn't stop you from being tova either. The sof kol sof halacha l'maisa. Ideally, certainly, the Chatchila, we should be focused for the other shitas that are cholak Dagam Vava, and we should try to be Makayin the psak of the Shach, the Chatchila, that if you switch the order, if it's not too difficult to go back and be tova the Kli again after the Hagala. Like the Shach Paskins, and the Shach doesn't, when the Shach says this psak, I mean, he points out, like we pointed out before, the Chavos Binyamin points out a very important point, which we already ma'or, but he takes it from the other angle, that if the Ramah, right after the Ramah, after the Shulchan Aruch said that there's a yesh omer you have to be choser, but the tovel if you did switch the order. Right after that, the Ramah says, "Ein lahagil shum kli kol zman shu ben yomo." The Ramah says you should not ever be magil any kli that's not a ben yomo. So the Ramah said that immediately after this halacha of that the Shulchan Aruch says that there is an order. You should do Hagala and afterwards Tefillah. But once the Ramah said you can't ever do a Tefillah, you can never do Hagala while it's a Ben Yomo, so the Ramah should have pointed out, and therefore there's no need to worry about the order according to the Dagam Vava. How could the Ramah be quiet about that? How can none of the poskim point that out? How could the Shach, when he says that you have to be choser, not Tefillah, you should go back and be tovel again to be Mekayim the Shita, and the Shach knows that we hold halacha ma'isa like the Ramah, that we're never machshir a kli, we never do Hagala on a kli that's a ben yomo. How could the Shach and everybody stay quiet and not say that, by the way, this whole order makes no difference once the Ramah said that we're not magil a kli that's a ben yomo? How can they all be shosek? Ella what? It must be that they're holding like the Makor Chaim. They must be holding that that even if it isn't not a ben yomo, still there's a halach of an order of Hagala and afterwards Tefillah. So since that's the stimus Ramah, stimus poskim, and nobody pointed that out, so there's a tremendous chiddush of Dagam Vava. We have what to rely on in Shas Tzchak, but the Chatchila certainly we should not rely on it, and we have to be choser with Tovel if we switch the order. Okay. Now, the Ramah we just mentioned that said that ein lahagil shum kli kol zman shu ben yomo. So the chiddush of the Ramah is that even though there are cases, now the reason not to do a Hagala when it's a ben yomo, as we know, as we saw in Beis Yosef, then if you take a kli, for example, you take a pot. So the klal is you want to kasher this pot. The klal is, and the Gemara says this, that there's no pot that contains within it the water that it holds that has more than 60 of the volume of the actual pot itself. And since we have the following problem, if you do a Hagala on a kli that is a ben yomo, so you have actual isser in the kli. So what prevents the isser that goes out of the kli? The isser that goes out of the kli should trafe up all the water that it goes into, unless you have 60 against it. So the only way to kasher something which is a ben yomo would be if you have 60. So the poskim raised this question. The Torah requires Hagala by Klei Midyan in the Parshas Matos, where we learn all these halachos from. And the Torah is obviously dinim deraisa, right? We're not talking dinim derabanan over there. We're not talking about ein ben yomo. We're talking that the Torah requirement, the chiyuv deraisa of doing Hagala, that's only going to be when it is a ben yomo. The whole Parsha of Midyan in Parshas Matos, the Klei Midyan is obviously when it's a ben yomo, when they want to use it immediately. So they raise the question about how do they kasher the pots, the bigger pots. They were treif. They never have 60 against it. So some Rishonim Taka say that in a Chanami, Klei Midyan they only kashered smaller pots and pans and things they could put inside of a much bigger pot that taka held 60 in the water keneged the kli that you're kashering. So you would put it in 60 because if there's less than 60, then the plata that goes out of the pot is going to aser the water. It's going to turn that water into the water itself into treif, and then it's going to turn around and just aser the pot again. So you didn't accomplish anything by doing hagala. So you have to have 60 against it. And the bigger pots, the taka didn't do that when they were ben yom. They had to wait till the next day to kasher anything that were bigger. So the Ramah is saying that the mitzad minhag, even though there are situations where you could kasher something with 60, and there's not a problem in halacha, the Ramah is saying that mitzad minhag, we're knowing not to do that. We're not knowing to be kasher any pot at all when it is ben yoma, because since coming up with 60 is not such a clear thing, it's the cheshbonos aren't so pasha, not everybody can do it, then it's very possible that people will make a mistake and end up kashering, thinking they're kashering when they have 60 when they really don't, and they're just going to be using a treif pot that day. The lashon of the Ramah that he adds in his words, he didn't just say ein lahagil kli, he said shum kli, any kli. What's shum kli coming to add? So the chiddush of the mashmos of the Taz, and the way also the Chakos B'Yamin explains the Taz, is that in general, if you have a kli heter, let's say you have a kli that's used for basar, and you're kashering it to be used for chalav, which we're not going to go into right now, but it's brought down, the Achronim bring down, the Dagam Abava also brings down, there's a famous Magen Avraham in Tafkuf Tes in Hilchos Yom Tov, that the minig is not to kasher from fleishiks to milkos to milkos to fleishiks. That's mitzad minig. So that's a whole subject in its own right. We're not going to go into it today. But that's not the ikar din, it's mitzad minig. But if ikar din, if you're coming to kasher from milkos to fleishiks or vice versa, so be'etzim there is no treif over here. There's just meat or milk. It's a davar heter. So that's called heterabala. And when that, even if you don't have 60 against it, if whatever goes into the water will not be aser, even with less than 60. And then what goes back in the kli is not barnat, which is nosin tam, bar nosin tam, and it's really 3 times nosin tam. You had the tam had to go into the walls, from the walls into the water, from the water back into the walls again. So then 3 times not barnat, that's for sure nothing. It's a tam heter legamre, and it'd be totally mutter to do that. Even so, even you could totally do that on the very same day when it's a ben yomo. That's a chiddush l'Ramah when he says in lahagil shum kli, any kli, he's coming to include even a kli heter like that. Even if kli heter, if you want to kasher, if you're coming to kasher fleishiks to milkiks in a situation where you need to, so then even that you should not do when it's a ben yomo. That's the chiddush of the words shum kli, any kli at all, even a kli heter. Just the Knesset Gdola points out, it's brought down, he brings down the Chagos B'Yamin, that this chumrah of not to do magil kli ben yamo because of the 60 with the water, that only applies to Hagola. Libun is different. Libun, there's no issue of going into the water or 60, because you're actually burning up the Isser completely. There's no Isser to come out and go back in. You're completely burning the Isser. Libun means to completely burn it up. So there's no chumrah of a ben yamo. You're allowed to even do a ben yomo if you can get it to libun gamor. I would just add though that even though they say that la halacha, but to come up to libun gamor is a very difficult thing, and to get to the point that the sparks are shooting from it. So it's certainly recommended not to even do libun the very same day, because then once it's past that the first day, once it's no longer a ben yomo, then we can be much more makal about what's the getter of libun. So now, what's considered a ben yomo, the definition of a ben yomo, so the post can say that that's as long as it's within me'es l'es, it doesn't go by the actual day of the date. It goes by me'es l'es. It goes by the 24-hour period since it was used last, from the blias isser, from the time you use the isser. Now, let's say you heated up water in there in between. So you cooked pork in a pot, and you want to kasher the pot out. So you're waiting 24 hours. Otherwise, you need 60. And now, in the meantime, somebody went along and cooked hot water in the pot. So what do you go by? Do you go by the cooking of the hot water, or go by the use of the treif, by the time the treif was used? So the Maisa, since the water, like we said, since you don't have 60 in the pot, keneged itself, so that whatever goes out of the walls of the pot goes in the water, that water itself becomes isser. In itself, it's called, we say that it's nasa cheticha d'isur. It becomes it's like chanan. It becomes its own isser on its own right. Because we look at the pot as if the entire pot is full of isser, and you don't have 60 against it. It goes in there and ushers the water. So now you have to, the clock of 24 hours starts again for the time of the cooking of the water, because they became nevela. That applies only if you cooked isser. But if we're talking about, like we said before, you're kashing a pot from milchiks or fleishiks, so there is no concept of the water becoming fleishiks and becoming, because they're by heter, we say not barnat. We say nosen tam bar nosen tam. So we have a reason to be makel. So then the clock starts from the time of the cooking of the meat or the milk, the last cooking of the meat or the milk, not from the time of the cooking of the water. The water becomes irrelevant as far as when the start the clock. Okay. Now the Ramah just says one last point over here that kol makom shetzarach hagala lo mahani in kolfo lekli bekli umnus. And any place it needs hagala, it doesn't help if you would, let's say, take a plane. If it's a wooden kli, let's say, and you would like plane off the layer, a kadei klipa, that would not help. Like, because the Gra says, because when something is cooked, then it doesn't just stay at the surface; it goes through and through. So it's not a surface issue; it goes all the way through the entire kli. So therefore, only hagala helps, not just taking off a layer. But according to this, I thought, and I found that others bring down, that if a kli only became usher through, let's say, irui, by pouring onto it, where it only became usher kadei klipa, like if it had a rotev, I'd say it was poured onto it like treif gravy was poured onto it, it only became usher kadei klipa. So then to take off a kadei klipa from, let's say, wooden kli, to plane off a layer, that would be sufficient to make a kosher without having to do a hagala. Okay. The Ramah says that, and one last point in the Ramah in Sif Beis, ein lishtamish b'mei hagala. You're not supposed to use the water of the hagala. So there's a lot of discussion about this. The Ramah means beimitzad shtia, whether it's talking about drinking the water or even to wash dishes with it. We should consider it treif water. The water of the hagala, we should consider it after the hagala is over to be considered treif water. There are a number of reasons for this. We're not going to go into it tonight because it'll take us too long. In Siv Gimel, he says, Dini hagala v'libun halohem ksuvim hilchos Pesach. That's hilchos Tafnin Aleph, Simin Tafnin Aleph, Tafnin Beis, which are Ramakomos, we should be starting this coming week to get into those simanim with the Mishnah Brura. And lastly, we're going to see Sif Dalid, Machbas shemetagnim ba avapi sheleinin chametz v'Pesach dailo b'hagala, and in Shari Surim tzricha libun. So a frying pan that you fry with, even though for chametz and Pesach it's enough to do hagala on it. So the reason the poskim about the Taz and the Shach point out, why is it enough for chametz and Pesach? Because chametz and Pesach is called heterabala. It's considered, when it was nivela into it before Pesach, it was still heter, so it's called heterabala, and therefore it's enough to have hagala. But for Shari Surim, there was isurabala, it was bolea while it was an isur, and it was used over the open fire. So then you need to do libun. You need to be malav in it with actual fire. So now the Shach Lamaisa, the Taz just quotes the reason of heterabala. The Shach quotes that reason as well. But then he gives a second reason in the name of Teshuvas Menachem Azariah. That's the Ramami Pano. He says because the Goyim, they use their tashmish of Isser, they use it directly. It's not that they're using it through water and it gets absorbed. It's cooked in water and absorbed. But let's say they take fat, this treif fat, and they cook it. They boil it up in a pot. So it's not going through a medium of water, but it's going through it directly it's directly absorbing itself into the pot. So therefore, it's not considered in the level. It's not considered a ishtamshus of bishul, but rather a direct ishtamshus in the fire. And there's a big nafkamina between the two tamim. According to the Taz, in the first time of the Shach, Terabala. So Terabala is okay, even if it was directly onto it. If you directly cook the, let's say basar or chalav onto a pot, then it's terabala. It's fine to do agala. But according to the Menachem Azariah, according to the Ramami Pano, if I would directly boil meat fat into a pot, even though it's hetera, it will need libun. It's a big chumrah because it's being used directly on the pot according to that time. That's for it. So, but the halacha l'maisa, the Rov poskim hold not that way. Rov achronim hold that we don't have to be choshesh for the time of the Ramami Pano for a number of reasons we're not going to go into now. It's not enough time. But one svora, the mitzvah svora, they hold that since what you're using is liquid, any liquid that the only time that is considered hishtamshus al adiyah eish that needs libun is if it's dry. It's a dry hishtamshus. Like if you take a spit and you put the spit that you stick in the meat and put it over the fire, there's no liquid there. And the poskim say that even if you might have a thin layer of oil on there, that's not considered liquid. A thin layer of oil is not anything. The only time it's considered bishul, as opposed to libun on the direct fire, is if you have like an amount of oil. So it's like cooking in an amount of oil, not just a thin layer that smear onto it. So since the let's say the fat that the goyim will cook is liquid, so then according to the svor, the other way around. Even if you have actual meat fat, according to the way we'll paskin, even though it's used directly on the pot, there's no medium of water. Still, it's called a terabala and it's called bishul. It's not called libun. So that's the halacha l'maisa how we're going to hold. Now, one pella that I had, which the Shach and the Taz didn't point out, is that we spoke in the Shuir before Pesach that according to the Shittas Ramban, and that's the Shittas Mechaber, that in fact chametz is called isura bala. If you remember, we spoke about the chametz according to the Ramban, since it has a shem chametz all year, the shem, the isra is chal and Pesach. But if the shem chametz is there all year, the Ramban said that's different than say nosar. Nosar, when in the time that the kli was bolea from the korban, it was called the terabala because the shasa blia of the korban was heter. Only the next day when it became nosar, then it became isser. But the shas blia was heterabala. Mashen ken chametz, the shas blia was already chametz. It had a shem chametz right away. So then it's called isura bala, and that's the psach and the mechaber in Hilchos Pesach in Tafnun Aleph. So it seems to be a direct steer in mechaber. It was a pellet to me, but Baruch Hashem I found. Right here, the Gra and Rabbi Kvega here, both, if you want to look at them inside, they both point out the point. The steer and the Gra answers that really the Mechaber doesn't mean to say that he paskins is terabala. And that's really not what the Shach and the Taz mean either. They don't mean that to say the Mechaber holds it, that chametz is heterabala. But since it's a machlok, we know it's a machlokas whether chametz is hetera or terabala. The Mechaber knows that there's a machlokas like that. And a machbas, a frying pan in their days. It's not pashut whether it's called hishtamshus over the fire or it's considered liquid hishtamshus called bishul because they used a lot of oil when they used to fry. So lagabi the suffix of a machvas, whether it's called bishul or for that the Mechaber says for chametz we can be somach on the shitas that hold that it's heter bala to just do hagala on the machvas. But in a chanami, if you would use chametz on a spit, on something that was directly on the fire that didn't use an amount of oil, then clearly the Mechaber would hold that it's isura bala, and therefore you need real libun, not just hagala. So therefore, it's not a steer in Mechaber, and that's the hezber. What comes out in a very important chiddush, the halacha, and this the Chalkos B'Yamin points out, is that since the post is going to say that in order to be considered bishul, as opposed to necessitating libun, that it's used on the fire, you need an amount of oil. So he says that, like today's frying pans, that we use a very little amount of oil, and especially if you have Teflon, where it's made to it's a non-stick surface that doesn't really need oil at all. And if you use oil, you just put a tiny bit of oil just to sort of moisten it a little bit, but you don't have any amount of oil there at all. So there, Chalkos B'Yamin says is davar pashet, that's considered hishtamshus ala eish and not bishul when you fry. So our frying pan will not have the din of a machvas of those times. If we would fry today chametz, like you fry pancakes and all kinds of chametz on a frying pan, then on a Teflon frying pan with a little bit of oil, or you make French toast, or you make you fry bread with melted cheese and things like that. So you're using chametz mamish on a Teflon surface with a tiny bit of oil, just not to burn, but it's not an amount of oil. Then that's pasha did not consider bishul, and so you can't be mitzaref. There's no suffix over here of bishul or not bishul to mitzaref the machlokas heter v'isur bala. So since the Mechaber paskins that chametz is clearly isur bala, if we don't have another tziruf like we don't by our frying pans today, therefore we would need libun gomor and not just hagala for today's frying pans. And libun gomor is something that's impossible to do with Teflon without destroying it. So basically, there's no way to use it to kasher a Teflon frying pan for Pesach. Okay, we'll hold it with that today, and Mr. Shem next week we'll talk about Sif Hey, Vav, and Zion, and then we'll talk a little bit about Tafnan Aleph in the following year, but it would be difficult to cover too much in this year because we have so much to cover in Shulchan Aruch and not too much time left in this whole limud because we're trying to finish it before the summer break. So we'll Mr. Shem do the best we can, try to cover as many points as we can. All the best, Kol Tuv, and we'll be in touch.